Welcome to episode 5 of the Dave Whitty Show. I'm your host, Dave Whitty. Thanks for tuning in again, folks. Hope you had a great week out there. Happy to be back for another episode. Really enjoyed last week's episode with Brian Aylward. Just thought that was absolutely hilarious. So fun to get to chat with him on the other side of the world like that. And I mean, get break down on what he's been up to and everything during COVID. Plus, he has this big special coming out. I mean, I'm not going to dig too much into Brian as we did last episode, but I mean, make sure you do check out his comedy special coming out on March 10th on Amazon Prime, which is a huge deal for any Newfoundlander. This week, in Newfoundland, we're still in lockdown here, so I'm still at the house, still doing podcasts virtually through Zoom and stuff like that. Still in lockdown. They announced another 2 weeks where we're going to be shut down right up until, at least next Friday. For the right reasons, they're really nipping this thing in the bud. It seems like the cases are going down every day. There's lots of new recoveries. So, I mean, some very promising signs for Newfoundland as a whole. Maybe today you're listening to this, digging yourself out of the snowstorm. I'm recording this on Tuesday, but you're probably listening on Wednesday. So maybe you're outside. Make sure if you're shoveling, use your knees. That's a good little tip for you there. This week I'm joined by Jerry Stamp, who's a very, very interesting person. I mean, Jerry is a very gifted songwriter. He's been in the scene here in Newfoundland for years and years. And I mean, I first saw Jerry play would have been 15, 16 years ago. I speak about this in our interview, but I mean, I first seen Jerry play it at one of Adam Baxter's Epic Wednesdays at Distortion. And I immediately remember thinking that I had to get better as a songwriter because I was so enthralled by the way that Jerry performed. I mean, he uses very cool tunings. He's an incredible songwriter. His voice is so powerful. Really, really, really cool cat. I mean, he's got a great story to tell. He unfortunately was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, and he had to pivot from there and really start working and how he could survive. Physically, mentally, and financially. Jerry breaks down all that stuff, and he talks about living in Toronto with his band King Nancy and a ton of other stuff. I mean, it's a great interview. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to actually dig into some of Jerry's early stuff and chat about his Christmas albums and all that stuff. So make sure you do stick around for that interview. I thoroughly enjoyed having a chat with Jerry. This week, in sporting news, I mean, lots of stuff going on. The North Division is still rolling on hockey. The Leafs are rolling right now, guys, like absolutely rolling. Big two shutout back-to-back shutouts. I mean, with our backup goaltenders, Jack Campbell was in that Saturday night. His first game back looked absolutely stunning. And I mean, this guy, you got to root for him. He's just so fun to watch. He's so positive. It seems like the guys in the locker room love him. They just want to win around him. It's an incredible story to watch this guy. He's 29 years old. He's never really been a full-time starting goaltender, but he's back. And I mean, he's our Leafs backup goalie, and every time he's in, it just looks like the guys are fighting for him. Monday night was another big win against the Oilers. I mean, this team is second in the division. You got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. These guys are insane to watch. Just some of the fastest hockey players out there. These guys just take off, and I mean, the Leafs managed to shut them down again on Monday night. We had Michael Hutchison in net. I mean, what can you say about Hutch? He basically got shunned out of town last year, and he went on and played some playoff games with Colorado Avalanche, and then he re-signed back in Toronto again this year. Probably not thinking that he'd be doing a whole lot more, so he'd be, probably down with the Marlies or as a third string goalie. And of course, Freddie Anderson goes down. Jack Campbell gets hurt, and who do we got to call on? Michael Hutchison. And I mean, I'll be the first to say I was very skeptical about Michael Hutchison, and but this guy's 3-1 right now for the Leafs. He's our third string goalie. He's 3-1. He's posted a shutout. They probably could have won that game that is technically a loss on his stats. But I mean, they ran into a hot goalie that night, David Riddick in Calgary. So the Leafs play again Wednesday. Which would be today if you're listening, another big game against the Oilers. I think it's going to be a tough game, to especially, the third game in a row to try to shut down Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. These guys are just fantastic. It was getting a bit chippy there Monday night, so I'm expecting a bit of a scrappy game on Wednesday. Really looking forward to that. In basketball, I mean, the Raptors, everybody knows, they're down in Florida playing right now. They're shut down. COVID protocols last Friday. They had 6 coaches, including head coach Nick Nurse, um, out with COVID protocols. So, I mean, they managed to pull a win together, but everybody kind of knew that if 5 or 6 of the coaches are out with COVID protocols, it's probably floating through the team there. So the last couple of games have been postponed. And it looks like they probably won't play again until after the All-Star break, which in itself is kind of hilarious in a COVID year. Had to have an all-star game. I mean, it's going on this weekend. There's an all-star game, and then there's the dunk competition, which is going on at halftime, I believe, which is an interesting thing. I mean, it's going to be great for fans, but I can't see the players being too excited about it. But it'll be a nice little break, and hopefully by the time that's over, the Raptors will be back and hopefully all healthy, and hopefully all the coaches and all the players are safe and stuff like that. The Jays are back in preseason. Really excited to see the boys of the summer back. I mean, the Jays got a fantastic team put together. A lot of young studs there. Pitching's going to be pretty good. I mean, it's the hitting is all these young players that we have are going to be really exciting to watch this year. I got to say, I'm really looking forward to the Blue Jays season. In other news, I did another live feed last Friday night. It was really great turnout. I mean, we had hundreds and hundreds of people tuned in at once, and a huge reach of a big audience. I mean, ton of people writing in and requests and stuff like that, and I had a lot of fun, I gotta say. So big thanks to everybody who definitely popped on there Friday night and listened to a few tunes. I'd say I'll be back again this Friday for some more tunes, probably around 7 or 8. Really enjoyed doing those live feeds. It's a great way to interact with people and get chatting with folks, especially from all around the world, and a good opportunity to be able to play some different songs for people. Been really enjoying that. Like I say, I'll be back again this Friday, so make sure you tune in and follow me on Facebook. Yeah, I mean, other than that, that's kind of basically what's going on here in Newfoundland. We're still in lockdown life. There's lots of sports going on, and I mean, snowstorms, et cetera, et cetera. But we're into March here now. We're out of January and February, which generally are, the coldest and most dreary months of Newfoundland. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to be spring anytime soon, but I mean, at least we're out of the dark of January and February. It shouldn't be too much longer. Paddy's Day is coming up. It's going to be a different Paddy's Day this year. Last year I was in Puerto Vallarta, March 17th. I mean, it was getting kind of sketchy then. Trudeau was kind of calling home people at the time, and it wasn't quite shut down in Puerto Vallarta at that point. We did manage to pull off the Paddy's Day party, and on March 18th, the government of Puerto Vallarta actually shut down all bars. So we were lucky to pull that off. I mean, one of these days I'm going to get either John from the pub or some of the bands down there. I'd love to get them on as podcast guests. I mean, it's been an interesting part of my life. I've been traveling to Mexico for 8 or 9 years, where I've been playing tunes and just living in the culture of Puerto Vallarta. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's been really special for me. It's basically my second home. I just love it down there. Really missing it this year, and going to miss all the gang this year on St. Patrick's Day. That's for sure. Doesn't seem like if I was a betting man, I don't think we're going to get much of a Paddy's Day here. I mean, I had a ton of bookings here in St. John's with Mark Manning and a bunch of solo stuff as well. But fingers crossed we do get through and maybe get something going, but I can't see it happening. So who knows? Maybe we'll do a little virtual St. Patrick's Day show and try to play all your favorite songs around St. Patrick's Day. That's pretty much it for the little rundown, and I'm just going to throw it right over to Jerry Stamp, guys. This is a really fun interview I had. Really, really inquisitive into what Jerry has been through over the years, and his life, and just really, really, really intelligent guy. He's super easy to talk to and has a really great story. So make sure you do stick around for Jerry Stamp. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jerry Stamp to the podcast. Thanks for coming on, Jerry. How you doing today, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having
me. First off, for people who are listening at home, might not know who you are, maybe explain a little bit who you are, what you do, and where you come from.
Born and raised in St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador, East End kid for life. I was a traveling, touring, original recording artist for 20 plus years. And then I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, which kind of made me had to leave that career and start a new one. So I became a graphic designer. And luckily, through the last couple of years, I've been feeling better enough to play the occasional gig. again. So,
well, that's good. What kind of got you started in music? Like, I want to talk about music first, and then we'll dig into a few more things as it goes on. But what was some of the things that got you started in music? Like, what were some of your influences as a musician growing up, and what got you started in that?
I think I kind of had like a weird upbringing in terms of music because I had like my dad listened to like 50s 60s rock and like the Irish Newfoundland show, and then my mother listened to a lot of like Lawrence Welk and classical music. My sister listened to like Madonna and things like that, like pop hits of the day in the 80s. But then all the guys that she hung out with, her friends, listened to like Metallica and Iron Maiden.
Right.
So I had this like weird, like, I remember like being a kid and having like the cassette sleeve, like the long
Mm-hmm.
50 cassette thing. And I remember like showing it to somebody one time. And it was like Neil Diamond next to Iron Maiden. And they're like, dude, you're weird. It's a pretty weird like cross section music. And I never actually prepared myself to or planned or thought about going into music. I just loved it. I ate it up. I read every story and article at the time, watched much music religiously when I used to play music videos. Um, and then
The
actually,
glory days. Yeah.
yeah, for the 5 minutes they did that. And then there was all of a sudden a friend of mine sort of tricked me into auditioning for the Holy Heart Chamber Choir.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing like a mixtape one night, like people used to do mixtapes all the time. So I'm making a mixtape for a friend, and she's on the phone with me. We're just chatting, and she gets called away by her parents for a minute. When she came back, I was kind of singing along with whatever I was dubbing,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "You had a really nice voice. You should audition for chamber choir." And I was like, "No." Anyway, like a week and a half later, I get called to the office because I'm late for my chamber choir audition that she signed me up for. So next thing you know, I'm in chamber choir, and thus kind of started my career as a singer.
Yeah. So with the chamber choir and stuff like that, was that a reason that was that something that pushed you to go to university to study music?
Well, once I kind of made a decision that like music was where I wanted to go, because I fought it for a couple of years. I was like, I'm going to go into like, I don't know, chiropractic school, or I'm going to go to like through geology or something that was a more considered to be a more fortuitous career. Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows music is like a huff, it's a rough road to go down and not necessarily make a lot of money. So I fought it, and for years I just kept still writing songs and just kept wanting to do it. So I said to myself, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make sure I know all the ins and outs about it. And if people don't like my music, then that's fine, but they can't say I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Absolutely. So yeah, so when you graduated high school, you went to university, you studied music, classical music, I believe it was, right?
Yeah.
And voice studies. Yeah. Yeah. So what was that experience like, in the university?
At first, I hated it. My first day of school, I was like, oh, I've made a terrible mistake. Because I was like a pop rock kid. I had some like, a little bit of music lessons behind me and piano and stuff, but I wasn't like I didn't understand theory. I didn't understand a lot of that stuff. And a lot of my classmates had been doing that kind of stuff for years, right? They were all like proficient at theory and had taken all these courses and done like Royal Conservatory exams. And a lot of my instructors were very openly letting me know how they did not appreciate a rock musician trying to come into their world.
No way, man. That's very interesting. So was the entry process tough for that? Like without knowing a whole lot of theory and stuff like that, or?
Well, technically speaking, you have to do your audition on your main practical instrument, which for me was voice. Um, but then you have to do like a piano proficiency exam. You have to write a theory exam, and that kind of places you into where you will go if you get accepted. So you basically get accepted based on the fact that you have graduated high school. You got the marks to get in university, but then you're really only accepted in the music school program based on your instrument, your audition. They have to hear if they think there's something there they can work with. Everything other than that you get tested on is more so about like what level do we put you in. Like with me, it was like you got to go into rudimentary theory because you don't even know enough to start first year theory. So I had to like start at rudimentary theory. I did like the first year piano course, that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, it's basically your audition that gets you in, and then everything else is kind of figured out afterwards. Now I actually didn't get accepted at first based on a mistake from the registrar's office, um, which told them that for some reason I didn't have the marks to get in school. So actually, like I just went to the dean of the music school and kind of said, like, just want to know, like, is there anything I can do to improve upon for next year if I want to do a re-audition? And that was when she kind of found out that like the registrar's office had this wrong scoring mark written down for me or something. Basically said like I hadn't graduated high school. I was like, no, I've been done for over a year. So we had to figure that out, and that took a couple of weeks. But after that was like settled out, it was like, okay, you're in. But yeah, once I started, at first I was like, this is a bad decision. And over time, I kind of won over some of those professors, and some people left, and new professors came in, and a lot of the new professors were much more accepting of a pop rock musician.
Right.
Um, so that was definitely helpful. I mean, as far as I understand it now, the school is very open to like a lot of young like rock musicians and stuff coming to school. But when I first started, there was maybe like 4 or 5 of us, and we were all kind of like pigeonholed by some of the particular props we're teaching.
Yeah. What was that? Was that like was that intimidating to do that? To be kind of to put yourself in that position as someone kind of a little bit different in the School of Music, or?
Yeah, I mean it was, but I think in a weird way, like I've always had this weird ability to like confront my own anxieties about things because I know there's like a bigger picture that I'm going for. So as anxious as I was and uncomfortable as I was with it, it was like, but this is what I got to do. If I want to do this career in music and I want to know everything I can know about it, so that I will be good at it, I got to do this. So I just kind of sucked it up and did it.
That's right. Yeah.
And after about like I mean, my first semester there was not very good, but then after that I started to figure things out a little bit more. I met a few new, because I mean, you know how like, you meet like new professors every semester. In my second and third semesters, I met professors who were much more like nurturing. They were more into like, you got something here, we can teach you. So it was much better. I mean, my first year vocal prof was great. He was like, loved the fact that I was a rock musician. He was like, I'm going to teach you how to do both things, techniques for like rock music and techniques for classical music. So, so I did have some people in my corner, but it took a while to get kind of comfortable and get going. By my second year, I was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, after university, you started the group King Nancy. That was formed here in St. John's, or because I know you moved to Toronto for a while, right, with the group. How did that kind of start? Was that in St. John's, and who was involved in that project?
Hold on. We kind of started King Nancy accidentally. A guy I grew up around but not friends with, Mark Turner, saw me play solo acoustic at a cabaret event one night. It was actually something Amelia Curran put together before she moved away. And he just kind of came up to me and said, like, hey, man, I haven't talked to you in a couple of years. We should jam sometime. So we started kind of just jamming as an acoustic duo, and that turned into a couple of songs. And eventually we spent a couple of years going back and forth with different members. Like we had some of the guys from a band called Feed backed us up for a couple of months before they all moved away. Like we knew they were leaving, but we just did it for a laugh anyway. And then about a year after all that happened, we kind of just accidentally met Brad Madden, who played bass, and Chris Clark, who played drums, within about like 3 or 4 weeks of each other. Brad was a bass player in music school, and Chris was a drummer who had just moved back to St. John's from living away. And a bunch of his friends and other bands that we were friends with kind of said, like, you guys should jam with this guy. So we did, and things just kind of gelled, and we just kind of took it from there.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think you guys did. I was counting down through, like, King Nancy released 4 or 5 albums as a group, I believe, right?
Yeah, we did like a full length album. Then we did like an EP. Then we did another full length album. They're like kind of our official releases. We also did a series of like kind of sold from the side of the stage live releases.
Oh, neat. Yeah, right on. So what was the idea behind moving to Toronto? I mean, I'm a musician. I know what it's like in St. John's, but like, what was that? What was behind that, and how did you feel about that? Like, what kind of thoughts were going through your head when you made that decision?
It was a very arduous decision. I'd been thinking about it for years, even before King Nancy became a thing. That was kind of my goal. I mean, my plan was, go to music school, learn what you're doing, learn your hone your craft, and then go to a city like Toronto or somewhere where like you can kind of get a foot in the door. Toronto was more decided upon by the band once we started talking. Like I kind of told all of them, this is what I'm planning to do. If you guys want to come, let's go do it. Right. They were all kind of like, absolutely, let's do it. So we kind of decided on Toronto for that reason. When it was me thinking about doing it solo, I was fine with the idea of like, maybe I'll go to Boston, maybe I'll go to New York, maybe I'll go to LA. I don't know. I just wanted to go somewhere and start doing it. So as a band, we could just decided that Toronto made sense because it was still in Canada. It was central in the country, so we could tour. And it wasn't too far away from home that, you were unable to get back there at any point in time. So we kind of decided to do it a year before we were going to go. Like the guys agreed that we were going to do it. We all kind of saved up some money and put that first CD out and all that kind of stuff. And the CD came out, like, I think about a month and a half before we actually like piled into the van and moved away.
And you guys did some extensive touring, I mean, throughout Canada and stuff like that. Like, what was that life like? I mean, how long were you were in Toronto for 4 or 5 years, I believe, or
4 years, yeah.
4 years, yeah. And I mean, you guys, I was going down through some of these notes here, and you know, you're saying 250 gigs a year sometimes, stuff like this, and a lot of touring and you know, meeting label execs and stuff like that. Like, that must have been just a whole new experience in itself.
It was wild. It wasn't. It definitely wasn't as, you know, romantic as people often think it is.
Mm-hmm.
We like King Nancy wasn't playing 250 gigs a year. That was more like when I started doing solo stuff.
Sure, right. Sorry,
but
yeah.
we were still doing like we all worked like Joe jobs throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
Monday would be band day, so we all had Monday off work. We would like go. We'd rehearse for 3 or 4 hours. We'd go back to my place. We'd get a few beers and some pizza or something like that, and we'd sit down and we'd watch like live DVDs from anybody.
Oh,
We'd just
cool.
go to the video store around the corner from my place, and we'd get like one night we might get like Madonna and Pink Floyd, and we just watched both of them back to back.
Yeah.
And we would pick them apart and say what is good about this performance,
Yeah.
what works, what doesn't. So we really studied music and how it all worked, and we went out like pretty much every night to like the main music venue bars at the Horseshoe and the Rivoli and all that stuff, and we met all the right people and just kept talking. We weren't like glad handers, because I mean, only one of the guys in the band would be a self-professed, you know, able to walk up to a stranger and be like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm so and so from this band." The rest of us were very like, you know, if it didn't happen generically or organically, we wouldn't be involved in it. But yeah, I mean, we worked. We played a bunch of gigs. We got noticed fairly early, but it was a weird time. Like, I mean, I don't think anybody now would have to move to Toronto. You could, and it would still work to your advantage in some ways. But at that point in time, like we were, I think, one of the last bands that kind of had to move away to try to get noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Like while we were away, that's when like you had the Novak started and Hey Rosetta started, and they started from here, from St. John. So they managed to build a base up here and have that support behind them. Whereas when we left, like pretty much any band who had done anything before would tell you that either they left or they were perpetually on the road, which is basically the same as being left.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you couldn't kind of get that real. Not a lot of bands would get that notoriety from still being here. You had to get out of town.
Do you think the reason? Sorry, do you think the reason that like people, you know, you're saying like the Novaks and Hey Rosetta, et cetera, they toured out of Newfoundland and a little bit after you guys. Do you think the reason that is because of the travel? Do you think it's different now because of social media and the way the internet works and stuff like that? Are those factors and those reasons why you necessarily wouldn't have to be in Toronto nowadays?
I think definitely the social media aspect is huge now. I mean, when we played in Toronto, the joke was every band you'd meet was never from Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now the same idea in Halifax. Whenever you see like a band gets like, you know, a blurb and like exclamation, I was like Halifax based, blah blah, Toronto based, but that's not where any of them are from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everybody moves to those centers, but usually they're people who are closer. Like if you live in London, Ontario, or Guelph, you move to Toronto.
Right. Yep.
It's not normally that you get like a band from all the way, you know, 3,200 kilometers away that moves to Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you got to do it now. I think with social media and all that kind of stuff, you can. It's also easier thanks to grants. I mean, between Factor touring grants and showcase grants, Music NL has a bunch of grants that can help people get off the island. You know, in a weird way, the money that Music NL would give bands pretty much paid for them to get off the island.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so much a big support for like, you know, get to Toronto and do all that kind of stuff. Like if you already had your van or whatever, you had to drive across the island and pay the expensive ferry fees. Once you got to like Nova Scotia, it's like that was the end of your Music NL money.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got off the island, you got back on. That's pretty much what it worked out to be.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of folks maybe who are listening probably don't realize, you know, like we live on the east coast of the island, and it's a long drive to get to the other side of the island. It's 10 or 11 hours to get to Port aux Basques. Then you're looking at a ferry, which is not a cheap endeavor. It's expensive, and it's still another 4 or 5 hours on a ferry. And then you're still only in Cape Breton. You haven't even really made it to Halifax yet. You're still looking at another 4 or 5 hours. So, you know, just to travel, just alone to get to a place like Halifax is a really long trip and an expensive trip, especially for 4 guys. You know, you're in a van, the gas and hotels or whatever, you know. So I think that's a huge thing with that all. So King Nancy's in Toronto, you're doing gigs and you're touring around. You decide to move back to Newfoundland. Was that a group decision? Was that a solo decision, or how did that play out?
Ironically enough, it was sort of a group decision, but prompted by one member who then, when the time came to actually move home, stayed in Toronto.
Oh, no way.
We were all kind of doing our thing, and we had our successes and our failures, and you know, things were up and down. But for the most part, we were very happy with where we were going. We loved what we were doing musically. We had some industry stuff go on that we were just like not big fans of. The short version of the story is we got cheated by a Battle of the Bands thing that we were invited to take a place in. We won the overall Battle of the Bands after playing numerous gigs for it, and then half the prizes didn't come through.
Okay.
So it kind of screwed all of our because we planned for like, if we win, this is what we do. And so once we knew we planned or we'd won, we had like, okay, there's the CD manufacturing, recording time, all this stuff. So we were like, we've got it all mapped out. We're going to release a new album at this point in time. Here's the songs. We're ready to go. And then prize after prize started falling through. So it was like,
what was the reason behind that? Did you ever find out, or?
Mostly because one company went under
Okay.
that was a sponsor, and then the guy who was promoting the event basically was a bit of a shyster and said, well, I'm not paying for it out of my pocket, so screw you guys.
Oh, the typical industry stuff. I hear you. Yeah.
And I mean, it happens to everybody. I think no matter how smart you are, there is going to be at some point in time somebody who's going to screw you over, whether you think you're smart or not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that almost that kind of stuff needs to happen to people, because you need to learn how to avoid, maybe not avoid those situations, but how to learn from and move on. And
yeah, like we learned a lot, like from that experience alone. We started talking to like, entertainment lawyers and all kinds of stuff. So we learned a lot about, what responsibility do you have, and what responsibility these people have for furnishing the prizes they say they're going to. If somebody says they're going to give you something, how legally binding is somebody's word versus an email, which is a written paper trail. There's all kinds of stuff that you learn. But I mean, the only way to learn is to do it. You can read a book about it, but you're not going to remember all those details. And I think most people are genuinely try to hope that most people will be good about these things, but sometimes they're not.
That's right. Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. So you move back home, several members of King Nancy. Do you guys still keep playing in St. John's, or what kind of happens there?
Well, when we got back, we knew when we were coming home, like one of the guys stayed in Toronto because, he met the girl of his dreams and they got married and they're still in Toronto and they come home every once in a while for a visit. So that's kind of what we did. King Nancy would become more of an occasional band. Whenever all four members were in the same city, we'd play together. And we haven't done it in a couple of years, obviously, because I stopped playing. And everybody kind of went down their own directions. Everybody got married, had kids, all that kind of stuff. So, some people kind of got out of music and I kept with it. So
was that a little spark for the solo kind of career, or was that kind of what played into that?
Yeah, very much so. Because I mean, King Nancy was, I was the main songwriter. Like I'd say 75% of the songs were solely written by me, and the other 25 were written by me and the guys working some stuff out. So once we moved home and when it became clear that like King Nancy was not going to be touring anymore, doing that sort of stuff, I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll see what solo is like again. Because I was doing solo gigs in town while I was with King Nancy, but I never really did that many solo gigs in Toronto. I only did like 2 or 3, like usually special events where like the guys couldn't play or they just wanted a soloist. So I, in a weird way, I took 4 years off of doing solo and had to kind of get my chops back up. So I started playing like a couple of weekly regular shows. I play like every week at CBTG's with a couple of guys, every week at the Bull and Barrel.
I remember the Thursday nights at the Bull and Barrel. Actually, I did a couple of those years ago. That was probably, I want to say 2014, maybe somewhere around that place. Yeah. I do remember doing those Thursday nights. They were always a lot of fun when we used to play just right in the corner of the Bull there. Yeah.
Yeah. We used to, I mean, I when I first moved home in 2006, it became like a goal of mine to kind of create, I guess not necessarily solely create, but try to nurture a singer-songwriter scene in St. John's, because there was a few songwriters who were known, but they were usually more established. So I kind of got involved in like the CBTG's thing. Was myself, Luke Mertzoy, Justin Mertzoy, and Brad Wheeler. And the four of us would always play. And we play with each other. We play off each other. We do solo sets. Sometimes we have guests who were in town show up. The Bull was originally just me. And then after a while, I talked to Tino Borges, the owner, and said, what about if we did this and invited like a weekly new guest? I'd do a set, guest would do a set, I'd close off another set, kind of like an extended open mic. And that worked out great because then I started having friends from outside of Newfoundland. I convinced them to come to Newfoundland, even though there wasn't much money here on touring wise, because it's just not as much cash as there is in other cities. But people love the idea of like coming to Newfoundland for a week, and when they play like 4 or 5 nights in a row in the city for a different crowd every night. So that meant that I had control of like the CBTG's gig, the Bull gig. Adam Baxter was doing the Wednesday night gig at Distortion, so he would usually cater to my guests as well. So we kind of started creating the sort of Newfoundland exchange program. Any singer-songwriters who played with these people here or got to know them, if they left the island to go do a tour, these people would book them good gigs in their cities.
I mean, yeah, that's
kind of the fundamental.
That has happened to me, actually. You know, like that's happened to me in the past. I've speaking of the songwriter series, like I you know, the Wednesdays with Baxter were incredible, you know, and that run of shows was amazing. And, you know, I met a lot of people through those shows who I have played with in other parts of the country as well. So yeah, you're definitely right there. I remember the first time I ever seen you, Jerry. We played a show together at the at the Distortion on one of Adam Baxter's Wednesday series. And without trying to blow too much smoke up your ass, I remember I did a set, and at the time I was playing with a band called Mo Cove, which was kind of like acoustic gutter mouth, I guess. Like it was kind of like some songs were like funny, you know. I was writing songs about my buddies riding the bus, or I'd be writing songs about a breakup. You know, it was a hard world to try to mix both those together. And
yeah,
I always found the toughest part with me with those was that the songs that I could write that I would get a laugh out of people, the songs that weren't so funny meant more to me. And I felt that every time I would try to play those, it was kind of getting pushed in the back because people just wanted to hear something to have a laugh. And I remember doing that Wednesday series, and it was the first time I had ever seen you perform. And I played first, and Baxter played second, and you played third. And I stood there with my jaw on the floor, man. I was absolutely enamored with you. I remember so vividly watching you and thinking to myself, I have to get better. I have to get better than this, because I can be better than this. And I like to write songs, and I like to write songs from the heart. And I watched you perform, and I remember thinking that very, very much so. And so that was a big part of songwriting for me, was watching guys like you kind of doing it a little bit before me. So thank you for that. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you.
So,
I mean, I had the same experience, obviously, coming up, like watching guys like Sean Panting and guys like that play, like Jody Richards, and even and who I wasn't even friends with as such at the time, but you know, became friends with just by asking them questions. But that's one of the things that also happened to Kay Nancy when he moved to Toronto. Like within like 6 months of being there, we were kind of like, we were pretty good in St. John's for St. John's. But part of the problem with St. John's is it's such a musical town that if you've got the musical ability, you get thrown on a stage and everybody goes, that's awesome. Nobody really teaches anybody here how to actually get better at their craft and how to be more professional and stuff like that. And we kind of realized 6 months into Toronto, like we need to get better. We need to know every possible outcome. If you break a string, what do we do now? You know, so we had like songs figured out. It was like, if Jerry breaks a string, the next song is this, because he can change a string while he's still singing it.
Right.
If Mark breaks a string, it happens this way, and blah, blah, blah. And so we thought about every possible opportunity. And I still do that to myself now. Like if I'm planning a gig, even if I'm going to play one gig every like 6 or 7 months now, it's like, I'm still plotting out that gig in my head going, here's the order of songs and here's why. Right? It makes perfect sense to me. If somebody requests a song there, I'm like, I'll get to that, but it's because it's already in the order I'm doing the songs. Right? There's a through line to everything I do, and every song I write, every show I play, everything has its purpose and why. And I think that's probably what you saw that night. I mean, yeah, there's an element of like maybe the songs are good and the performance was good, but those things are stronger because of how I think about music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of my musical friends, they don't necessarily think about it a lot that way. Some do. Some are totally like, I mean, you talk to Ian Foster and he'll talk to you for 7 days about why he chose to use the chord G in that particular song.
Yeah.
You know, but most songwriters are just like, I don't know, just kind of fell out of the hands or came out of the throat and just worked.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool. You made
an interesting point just now, just talking about, you know, how you can kind of throw any musician up on a stage in St. John's and people are going to say they're good, but, or, you know, or whatever in that kind of sense. But what do you think the reason is that, I don't want to say a lot of Newfoundland musicians, or they don't get ahead, but they don't learn the ins and outs of the business? Is it because of lack of managers or stuff like that within the city, or?
Well, I mean, I think we could talk all day just on that question alone, because yes, there's a lack of management. There's a lack of professional standards. I mean, in a city like Toronto, you don't just go and say, call up a bar like, hey, how's it going? My name is Jerry. I want to play a gig. And they'll go, cool, come down Thursday. You know, that actually happens in St. John's.
Oh yeah, very frequently.
It has many times. Whereas those cities, it's like, no, you're booking like 6-7 months in advance. So if you're going to do it up there, you've got to be prepared and ready to do it. You got to have your press get together, your EPK or whatever you need, your demos, all stuff. Here, people are going to bars and going like, hey man, can I play a gig? And they go like, what do you sound like? You got a demo? Like, no, I don't got a demo, but we're kind of like rock meets like this meets that. And they're like, cool, all right, well, we got 2 bands playing on Friday, so why don't you come down and open up for them? All right, great.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic for getting people on a stage,
Mm-hmm.
but it sucks in terms of making them harness their professionalism.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely brings
sort of
people to a place where they, I don't want to say maybe plateau, because they don't really know where else to reach, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like that stuff I was talking about us watching live DVDs all the time. That wasn't because we were going to study how Madonna sings and rip off Madonna's vibe, but it was like, what is she doing theatricality wise that is entertaining and interesting a crowd? Like, there are some bands I've seen at St. John's that are, if you close your eyes, they're the most incredible band you've ever heard. And if you open your eyes, they're the worst thing you've ever seen on stage.
Yeah.
Because they're all just standing there like
mopes.
And if you're not entertaining, like, you get the musical performance experience is not just sonorous, it's also visual.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not going to entertain your crowd, whether that's like, it could be something as simple as the band just has to be rocking out, or super stoic. I mean, one of my favorite things I ever saw in Toronto was a band called the Ladies and the Gentlemen. And this one night they played, and all of them were wearing like white, like painter's pants and like a white Hanes t-shirt. And they're just all wearing the same thing on stage, doing the thing, rocking out. All of a sudden, 3 or 4 songs in, there's a part where everybody stops playing. It's just the singer singing and the drummer doing a breakdown. And the rest of the band just stands there and goes like this. And it was the most theatrical thing I'd ever seen a small band do.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you see like a big band, like with lights and crazy shows, do stuff all the time. But when we saw them do that, I was like, that's cool. That's
innovative and neat. Yeah.
I could not hum you 3 bars of their music, but I remember that to this day. And that's like 15 years ago.
Yeah. So it's incredible how stuff like that stays with you. And that's kind of the point that I was saying. I do remember when I seen you live, it just kind of has stuck with me forever. So yeah, so you move home and you're doing some solo gigs around, and you start working on some solo records. Like, you got a ton of solo records out. You got 3 or 4 solo records, or maybe 2 or 3 solo records, plus there's 2 Christmas albums in there. And the last one you put out was 2014. Kind of talk about those records that you put out and moving into the Christmas records. I want to talk about those because those are very popular. I always see you're always doing really well with those at Christmas time, and people love them. They're always getting played on the radio stations in around St. John's and stuff like that. And then maybe a little bit about the last one, Rogued Out.
Okay, so when I first moved home, the first thing I did was start saving up to buy like a home studio setup. And once I got that stuff together, I knew I was planning to go on the road in 2008. Which I did a mini tour kind of thing in like 2008, just St. John's to Toronto and back over the span of like 3 weeks. Nothing crazy. And while I was on tour, all the stuff that I had to sell was King Nancy, because I didn't have any Jerry Stamp merch yet. So it was kind of like, I had to make sure I was at the merch table explaining to people like, no, this is my band. This is not some other person that you missed another band earlier or whatever.
Yeah.
So I realized that I needed something. So at first, when I started to figure out my way around some of the new recording gear, because I was an analog recording guy in studios, so using digital recording gear was very foreign to me. So some of the first stuff I did was record solo versions of some King Nancy songs, and some other songs that I'd written that just didn't really have a home yet. So I put out the album Racing Bad Weather as like a tour companion album, so that I went on this tour in October, November, December, getting home in like mid-December. Thus the name Racing Bad Weather, because we know what the weather's like in Newfoundland in winter. And so that kind of became the first, I guess, official Jerry Stamp solo record, aside from like a live thing I put out in Toronto. And somewhere in like the next couple of months, I started doing the RPM challenge. And then when that was in February of 2009, and I ended up having enough material for like 2.5 albums. And I said to myself, maybe I'll put out 2 records for a laugh and see what happens. But I was doing an interview with somebody from, I think it was The Scope at the time. And I kind of thought the interview was done, and I let it slip that I was contemplating the idea of putting out 2 records and then maybe starting to work directly on 2 Christmas records, because I wanted to do a Christmas record, but I couldn't scale down the songs enough to figure out what 12 or 13 songs I would do. So I was like, maybe I'll do 2. I'll do like one that the white Christmas record that like Mom would like, and then the blue bummer Christmas record that's a little bit more rocking. It's more for me. And I made the mistake of mentioning that would end up being 5 records in one calendar year,
including the RPM. Yeah.
Right. So that of course became like the headline. I was, oh crap, what did I do? So then there was no backing out. Once it was like press, I was like, well, now I got to do it. So I pushed myself to get that done, and I did like I managed to do a couple of tours around it too. So, I put out one record in July, one record in August, went on tour, came back. Before I left in August, I had the Christmas record done that was off being mastered. So when I got back, it was time to release the Christmas record. And then when I got all that done, it was after Christmas, it was like, award season. So it was like ECMAs and CMAs and stuff like that up in Toronto, and Canadian Music Week, all that kind of stuff, North by Northeast. So I just started doing all that circuit, and I just basically didn't stop from like 2008 until I think it was 2011 was the last, 2011, 2012 was the last tour I did. And that was 54 gigs in 58 days.
So let me get this right. You released 5 records in the 1 year?
Yeah, from November till November.
Wow, man, that's absolutely incredible. And all original material, like that's a feat in itself. I mean,
almost all original. The Christmas album.
Sorry, yes, fair enough. Yes, the Christmas records. Yes, that's right. But still, like a lot of work and a lot of time, and even just the work behind, not even just the songs, just the work about putting out records. You know what I mean? Putting art together and all this stuff that comes with it, the manufacturing and all that stuff. That's just such an incredible feat in itself. I mean, releasing one record is hard enough. I can imagine 5 in the 1 year. So, I mean, that's incredible. So you're touring around 2014. You go into the studio with Robert Kelly and start work on Rogued Out. So what kind of happens then?
So by the time I finished those 5 CDs in 1 year, I had been basically on a track record of at least one record a year since 2002. Like King Nancy's first solo record, or King Nancy's first record. Then we did like a live album. Then we did an EP. Then we did a live album. Then we did another King Nancy record. So then I did a solo live record. Then King Nancy did a record. Then I started doing records. So I was like, I'm going to keep going. So for 2010, I was like, I did 5 in 2009. I think I'm okay for a while. So I started to plan for doing one that was going to come out in, I think, 2011 or 2012 that I guess would have been Rogued Out. But then I started having the health problems, the psoriatic arthritis, which at the time we didn't know what it was. And it started off in my left-hand ring finger. It was constantly paining. And so myself and the different doctors I spoke to, everybody thought it was probably repetitive motion injury from playing 250 gigs a year, like all that kind of stuff. So you're just burning yourself out. So I started kind of writing a little bit differently because my original plan was to do a full band record. And then maybe my next record I was thinking about for after that would be like a full acoustic record, kind of like, a rockin' and a more mellow record. But because of the way things worked out, by 2012, I was like, this is getting worse. Things are not getting better. If I'm going to do one more record, I got to get working on it in the next year or so. And that was when I started having doctors say, like, there's probably a good chance you're going to have to stop performing. You won't be able to play guitar anymore. Your throat will be closed off and you won't be able to sing anymore. So by the time I got it all put together and figured out, Rogued Out kind of became both the rock record and the acoustic record kind of smashed together. So it's like half and half. Half the record is rock and half the record is very mellow. And it became less about putting out a record that, you think people will like, and more about, this is my swan song. This could probably be the last record I ever do, and probably will be. I mean, at this point in time, I'm probably never going to do another record. I might get back into doing some singles, maybe even an EP, but I highly doubt I'm going to do a full-length album anytime soon.
That must have been such a shock, man. I mean, it must have been on top of the the kind of the physical pain that you were feeling and going through. Just mentally, you must have just been shocked on what your plans were and what you thought was going to happen in the future and what was going to unfold.
Yeah, I was a planner. I was a schemer. I was the guy who had like the 2-year plan, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan. And when the diagnosis finally came in 2014, while I was working on Rogued Out, that was kind of like the end of all my plans. It was like, nope, no more planning for you. You have zero control anymore. So, it does teach you some weird things. I mean, there are negatives and positives to having your life splintered like that,
Some notes on Rogued Out. You won Music NL Award for the Best Male Artist. You were also nominated for the Best Video, SoCan Songwriter, and Album of the Year. That's all for the same album. A fun note, we were chatting a couple days ago, and I was asking you a few things, and you sent along some pretty interesting notes. And one of them was, Embers was chosen by George Strombolopoulos as Indie Song of the Week, which came with a healthy bump and a pay from SoCan. What was that? What was all about? I do remember that happened, and I remember you reading about that on social media, but what was behind that story?
I don't
Also,
really.
sorry, I want to add one thing before you answer that. I remember something about Dallas Green or something as well. Was there like a Dallas Green thing where he showed up at a couple of gigs, or was there anything like that? Or am I thinking that?
Oh no, I can tell you a story. I was at Dallas Green's first gig, I think, as City and Color.
Right. Okay. But okay, I want to hear about George first. I want to hear about George first. Yeah.
Okay, so the George thing just kind of happened accidentally. I mean, you submit your songs, your albums to CBC, and they make sure that they get out. They're put on a list of like new releases for that week or that month or whatever. And then everybody who works at CBC has access to that list. So they can go listen to those songs and decide if they want to put some of the music on their show.
Oh, cool.
I guess for whatever reason, Strombo saw my album and gave it a listen and got at least, halfway through, because Embers is halfway through the album. And he decided that he liked that song, was like, this is going to be the indie song of the week, which, I didn't really even know was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody, like, I was in Halifax actually doing a release for the album, and I got home from the gig at 2:00 in the morning, and somebody had messaged me and said, like, you're on, or it was the next night after the gig, sorry, it's your Sunday night show, and somebody like messaged me and said, you're on Strombolopolis right now, and I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And I mean, his show was massive at that time when he was doing that CBC shows, a nationally aired program. Like, it was very, very well known.
It got national radio play. It also was on like Sirius XM satellite. So like broadcasting that, it was just from that one time he played that song, got a pretty decent bump in SoCan. And then there's also like a whack of just like crazy people on Twitter and shit who just suddenly follow you. It's like
new followers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Who's this person? Oh, I like this. I'm going to go follow this person. And for like 2 months, it was like me unfollowing people back.
Right.
Like, yeah, this person's, I don't want to see this person anymore. So it was pretty weird, but it was cool. It definitely, helped sell some albums and get some notoriety and stuff.
Yeah. And with Rogued Out, before I move on, like, did you do a CD release show with that record? And did you do any touring at all, or was it more so just the release?
No, unfortunately there wasn't. I knew there wasn't going to be any massive touring, so I actually booked a flight to Toronto, but then got like a 2-day stopover in Halifax. So I flew to Halifax, did a gig for like a CD release party, and then flew to Toronto, did a gig as a CD release party, and then came home. So that was pretty much the most of the touring. And then I did like a couple of gigs. I only did like the one actual CD release party, like gig with like a band at the Rock House. And then after that, it was like, that was in December that we did the actual release. The CD was out for like a month or so, and then CD release party was like December 19th. I waited until, Christmas time and everybody was home, got a good crowd. And then the next year I only did like, I think it was 7 gigs that last year. And they were all like songwriter circles, like 3-4 song gigs, nothing I couldn't force my way through.
How were you physically feeling at that time when you were putting out that record in say in December and you were doing those couple shows in Halifax, Toronto? How was your body feeling at that time?
Pretty garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, I was walking with a cane, so it was like me walking to a gig with the cane, guitar slung over the back because I had a backpack case, and like the box of CDs or T-shirts or whatever I had with me under the other arm. So it was just like trudging around with the cane.
For anybody who's listening at home who maybe is not familiar with this condition, can you explain what it's like and maybe some of the feelings that happens to you? Or
okay, so psoriatic arthritis is an autoimmune disease. It's obviously of the same family of arthritis. The big difference is that with with most forms of arthritis, it's fluid that builds up in the joints. So fluid can be massaged. You got fluid in your hand, you can just kind of massage through it, and it sucks, but you can probably do most things. What happened with me is I got a form called psoriatic arthritis, which means that instead of it being fluid in the joints, it's tissue. So there's nothing that can move that out of the way. It's just, it bows bones, it bows joints, it affects your muscles, your tendons. There were periods where like I couldn't pick up a mug of coffee. I used to work at a restaurant part-time, and I couldn't just like pick up the mug like this because my finger would feel like it was going to snap off. Things like that. And eventually I had to stop working. I couldn't move. I could barely play guitar. I remember being at a gig at the Ship, and I remember I'm pretty sure I made the decision to stop playing on stage. I've been thinking about it for a while. I didn't want to, obviously, but I was playing a gig at the Ship, and like my hand was just doing this chord, and all of a sudden this finger just went, nope. I was like, what do I do now? So luckily I was like able to reconfigure what I knew how to do, but this finger just stopped working. So for the rest of my like set, I was like finding new ways to play chords. And I mean, you can't perform like that. You can't that guy that was the super prepared guy for every gig. You can't go out and play a gig if you don't even know what the general outcome should be.
Mm-hmm.
So after like things started getting worse and worse, I was like, I don't want to be on stage a year, 2 years from now and just fall apart. Just get up there and play like half a song, be like, sorry guys, done.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to quit while I was still playing well
Sure.
enough that most people didn't notice. Even my close friends would be like, what's going on with that thing that you do? I was like, yeah, that's the arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, shortly after I stopped performing or stopped playing regularly, that was when I ended up being like basically bedridden for 6 months. I could barely leave my house. I pretty much only went out for like doctor's appointments. If I like, if I thought I was going to have to go to the bathroom at 3 o'clock, I'd start having to move towards the bathroom at 2 o'clock because it would take me that long to get there.
Wow, man. Wow.
So it was pretty crippling.
Yeah, no doubt. So, you're in a rough place. You're thinking, obviously you've devoted so much time and energy into this path and this career, as a performing artist and as a songwriter and stuff like that. 2015, you take the graphic design program from College of North Atlantic. What was the idea behind that? Was that just a move to try to do something that your body felt that it was capable of doing, or?
Well, I got when I had to stop working, I got the restaurant, and which I started working more at the restaurant as my body was hurting too much to go on tour. But then I had to slow down working at the restaurant as well. Shortly after that, so I wasn't working very much. I wasn't making any money, and then things started to get worse. I went on disability for like a little while, and disability was like nothing. It was like $500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to get $500 a month, but that's not going to pay any rent or anything. So, I figured I needed to do something. So I was living with my folks at the time because it just made more sense than living on my own when you can barely do anything. And I thought to myself, if I can at least summon the energy to get over to CNA, the school, get dropped off there every morning, then I can maybe start doing artwork for people's albums just from like the friends and acquaintances I have in music. I mean, I know the field, I know how assembling CD artwork goes. And so I went and did the program, and I kind of took to it a lot faster than I thought I would, because I was not a super computer savvy kind of person. My first computer was 2006. So I was not exactly the guy who was hacking into NORAD or anything. And it turns out I was good at it. I had a pretty good aesthetic for what I wanted to see and what I wanted to hear and how it was all going to work. And I started doing it. And then luckily, around that same time, I started new medications, which were very helpful. So I didn't have to just do the occasional bit of artwork from my bed. I could actually get out and do stuff. So I started doing photography in school and doing some band photos for people and using that as their artwork and their posters and all that kind of stuff. So that became a bit of a thing. And then through that, I kind of branched out to like logo design and even some video work and everything. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see I think you were nominated for a video you directed, I believe. Was that yours or Ian Foster's? Or
yeah, I did a video for Ian had a song called New Rush for an Old Town, which is an awesome song. And he asked me to do some sort of video project for it. Actually, I kind of asked him if I could do a video for it, because I had to do a video project for school, but it only had to be like 30 seconds long. But I had this idea for his video. And I said, like, how do you feel about me taking this on? He was like, cool. I mean, obviously, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course.
What musician's going to say like, oh, no, you want to do something for me for free? Absolutely.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, I mean, fast forward a little again. I mean, we're into about 2017, 2018. You decide to make this big move to Costa Rica. I mean, I've spent a lot of my time in the South as well. I travel. I'm in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for a few months every winter. I know how different the climates and stuff like that makes your body feel, even just regards to waking up in the morning. You make this move. It was a health reason, I believe, was the original reason, right? Like, maybe describe a little about what the thought process was about making that move and what made you make that move.
So in Christmas of 2015, just after the album came out, and I wasn't working anymore. I wasn't going to school or anything at that point in time. I had no prospects at that point in time. And my sister and her husband were in Costa Rica. They went there for Christmas. And they just FaceTimed me or Skyped me one day and basically said, like, why don't you come down here for like a couple of days and just see how it feels? And so I basically did. I think we talked on like a Tuesday, and by Thursday I was at the airport. So I went down on like January 4th or 5th. I was there for like 12 days. And I felt great like, as soon as I stepped off the plane. I mean, I wasn't like, throw the cane away and dancing down the streets,
Sure. Yeah.
but I felt much better. And I realized that like the climate there was very helpful,
Hmm.
uh, mostly because it's the exact same system every day. Where I live down there now,
Right. Right.
when I'm there, it's 34 degrees every day, no rain for like 6 months of the year. And then the only change when it does turn into rainy season is that it rains some days for like an hour and makes it a little bit more humid. So it's actually hotter.
Hmm.
Um, so in 2018, I graduated school. I'd taken a job working for a real estate agency. Um, I had done like a couple of other things on the side. Like I did a guest stint writing for This Hour's 22 Minutes, which was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Um, but I wasn't really, I knew that like winter was getting worse and worse on my body. And even though the medication was helping me move more, it was still just going to be a stopgap measure as long as I was constantly here in the winter. So I originally thought maybe I'll retire to Costa Rica when I'm like 60. And I was like, what am I waiting for? I'm a new graphic designer. I'm freelance, so I can do it from anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't have any like job to speak of that's like you have to be here for these office hours. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Costa Rica and spend my winter there and basically become a snowbird.
Yeah.
And so I did it and went down there. And my sister and her husband came down with me for the first month I was there. And we just kind of like looked around at some places and found a cheap condo and fixed it up.
Incredible. So, I mean, you spoke about instantly the changes that it affected your body. Like you've obviously spent a couple of years down there. I know that you have been home now, but obviously that's due to COVID and
Yeah.
everything that's going on there. But after being there for a few months, like what was happening with your body and your mind? Like how did you feel?
Well, I mean, it was a new adventure, so there's obviously a bit of the magic that comes to the whole like I'm in a new place, so you kind of get like that boost of energy anyway. Um, Obviously, having access to like super cheap fruits and vegetables that are like really healthy was much more helpful than like most of the food I was eating here was just like meat and potatoes, that kind of
Potatoes.
thing.
Yeah,
So it's like
exactly.
even though we live in a community that's like mostly a lot of fishermen, there's not that much like fish isn't actually that accessible here. It's fairly expensive. Down there, like you go down the beach every day and watch the fishermen come in and go like, I'll buy one red snapper and two parrotfish, whatever,
Hmm.
and that kind of. So you could eat good for cheap. And that's if you wanted to cook. If you wanted to go out to restaurants, there's always a taco special anywhere you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tacos on Tuesdays, tacos on Wednesdays, burritos on Thursdays. But by February of 2019, I stopped having to use the cane. So I guess like the extended periods of time down there, I felt like I didn't need the cane as much anymore. I was able to start going to a gym, which I would walk to the gym and home. So it was like 6 kilometer round trip. The fact that I could walk that far alone was showing me that there was positive things happening. And then by February, middle of February, I just decided one day I'm going to go for a walk without the cane and see how it works. And that was okay. And after like a month or so of doing that, I'd kind of gotten more comfortable and less concerned about falling and things like that. So I felt okay to not use the cane. And since I've been home now, this is almost a year now since I got home because of, like you said, COVID. And things were good during the summer. And the fall, there was like a brief period where like the weather changes and wasn't that great. And now it's definitely getting worse. I mean, I have to like do things very, very carefully, very gingerly every day. I'm not leaving my house. I'm basically just like waiting for people to like, getting people to bring me the things that I need. Um, I'm not going out anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I can't exercise right now. I might be able to do a couple of push-ups here and there, but that's like one day a week. Because as soon as I do them, it's like my wrist feels like it's going to snap off.
Hmm.
So the weather, the barometric pressure is the main thing.
Hmm.
People think it's the weather, but it's actually barometric pressure. And because in a place like Newfoundland, it fluctuates so much, we're in the middle of the cold North Atlantic. So one day it's like 12 degrees, the next day it's 5 degrees, then it's -10, then it's 7, then it's 3, then it's 2, then it's -8. So it's back and forth so much that your body doesn't have time to regulate. And even people who don't have autoimmune diseases feel this. Like people who get migraines and stuff like that, that's often what it is barometric pressure shifting. In a place like Costa Rica where the weather doesn't change at all for pretty much the entire year, the barometric pressure doesn't shift at all. So your body gets used to it and you can do some things. So, I mean, as much as I love Costa Rica and the friends that I've made there, I don't go there because I'm like, I want to go live in paradise. I was never a heat guy. I was the kind of guy who's like, if I was going to go on a vacation, I'd want to go to like some city with a bunch of museums, like London or Edinburgh or something like that. But the heat is definitely helps. So
That original move to Costa Rica, was that on a recommendation or was it kind of like an experiment?
it was sort of both. I mean, I had talked over like I don't make a lot of decisions very instantaneously. I'm a very like careful, calculated kind of guy. So I asked a bunch of my doctors, and they were like, "Well, I mean, there's a reason why a lot of Newfoundlanders have property in Arizona. Because in Newfoundland, we have a higher per capita ratio of people with forms of arthritis than any other province or state in North America. So that's probably because our gene pool is all from pretty much the same section of like the UK area for the most part. So a lot of people from here go to Arizona because it's dry, right? But I didn't want to go to Arizona. Just didn't want to go to the States. It wasn't my kind of thing. If I was going to go somewhere, I want to go somewhere where it's like culturally very different from me.
Mm-hmm.
Not just like, okay, it's still a very Anglo place. I was like, I want to go somewhere they speak Spanish or Portuguese or something. I don't want to go and just like walk off the plane and assume that I live down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So Costa Rica, because I'd been there before, seemed like a pretty decent spot. And the more I did research to just to go visit there for a while, the more I realized it's one of the safer places, not just in terms of crime and stuff, but also like they don't even have a military there anymore. They got rid of it like 1947, 48. They spend all the money that they saved on military on education and healthcare. It's pretty much the only stable government in Central America. I mean, you look at a country like Nicaragua, where like every 10 years there's a coup or something happens. Costa Rica is always pretty solid. It's still a third world country, or what I guess we call a developing country now. But yeah, it's a great spot. So I look forward to going back whenever I can.
What's life been like What's life been like in Costa Rica? I know you did a couple gigs down there, and I guess you're just doing graphic design and just hanging out. I mean, doing your thing. Obviously, you're still working down there. Everybody has to work. I mean, and how did the gigs come along?
Well, there hasn't been that many gigs.
I think there's one or two, I believe, right?
I did like one gig at a bar that a friend of mine owns, and it was good. And they were like, "This is great. We're going to do it again." And then the next gig that I had booked was actually in March. It was March 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And I canceled the gig a few days before because of the whole COVID thing. And the bar wasn't very happy about that. But then like within like 2 days of me canceling, they were like, "Yeah, you're right. You should have canceled." So they had everything was shut down. So I mean, that second gig hasn't happened. So I don't know. When I go back,
right.
I'm not really that worried about it. I mean, a gig is more for a bit of fun than a moneymaker.
Sure, yeah.
If you make a few bucks, that's great. Ideally, you want to make a few dollars, but at this point in time in my career, music is more of a hobby than it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's still my number one dream. That's what I love to do. But I'm not going to be, even if I was better tomorrow. I'm 43 years old now. I'm not going to hop in the van and go on the road again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That lifestyle is way too young for me.
Hey, I feel you, man. Trust me. So you come home after, obviously COVID, moves into North America. It's starting to creep in and around Canada. It's making its way to Newfoundland, end of March. I was also down south that time. I had to come home and quarantine for a couple of weeks. You come home. What's your initial thoughts on that?
When I first started hearing about COVID and people started talking about, the Trudeau started calling Canadians home and said, like, you guys should come home if you can. I was contemplating staying in Costa Rica and seeing if I could get the medication that I get now. I have to come home to get because it's very expensive. So my insurance covers it. Some people were saying, oh, it's only going to be a couple of weeks. And I knew it was going to be a couple of months. I didn't think it was going to be a year, but I knew it was going to be a couple of months. So when I started trying to source getting my medication down there instead, whatever way I looked at it, it was going to be very expensive. Whether I got it sent down there to me and then had to hire a private nurse or someone to come and give it to me because it's an infusion. So you sit in a chair. It's kind of like chemo. Sit in a chair and get pumped full of drugs for 3 or 4 hours, once every couple of 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. So the idea that I was going to have trouble getting that at least once was problematic. But then I was like, what if I'm here for longer than that? So my sister and her husband were there with me and they were like, we should go home. Well, my sister was the one who was like, we got to go home. We're definitely going home. She was not a fan of the idea of staying at all. She was like, no, we got to get back to Canada where it's safe. So we actually had flights. I had a flight booked out for March 26th. I was supposed to come home anyway to get my infusion, and then WestJet canceled my flight. So we were kind of like, I don't really know what to do. So we started stocking up supplies as we were going to stay there. And then all of a sudden one night, I actually did a live stream. The first one I did was March 18th from Costa Rica. And that night after we finished playing, we kept seeing like news reports about people freaking out in Canada. And Joanne my sister, kind of started freaking out and said like, we got to go home. So we sat there with like 3 laptops out, and we each were trying to get flights. We found, I think my brother-in-law found flights on Air Canada for like $3,000 or $4,000, some ridiculously sick price. And so we just said, screw it, and got flights and went home. And so we were quarantining down there, went through the airport system, got to Halifax, quarantined for a day or two. Then I flew back to St. John's, where I quarantined for another 2 weeks. So I was like the quarantine king for a while there.
I mean, that was a scary time. Like I mentioned, I was down south as well. And I mean, looking back on it, I don't want to downplay this virus by any means, but it was very new at the time. We had no idea. I mean, Trudeau's calling Canadians home saying, if you're abroad, get home now. Like, we don't know I was, terrified. I was like, what's going to happen? And I was the same way. I mean, I was down south and I was kind of thinking like, I don't really want to get stuck down here with this going on, and I want to get home. It was definitely a scary time, and thank God it is what it is. I mean, I don't want to downplay it or upplay it by any means, but I mean, we're all still here, and I think we're very lucky, obviously, to be in Newfoundland. I mean, you've been in Newfoundland now for the last year, and I think we've been very lucky that we managed to salvage a summer out of this. I know we're in a separate part of a lockdown here now again, but I mean, generally we've been pretty lucky out here in Newfoundland. So, I mean, thank God for that.
Yeah. I think we're in a weird spot as Newfoundlanders, because as both of us too, for people who were traveling at the time, travel was weird. People didn't really know what to do. I mean, I went on one plane because we had several flights coming home. One plane, they were passing out like moist towelettes. I was like, this is not like what you think it is. You think this is like an alcohol swab. You're just giving people like soap and water, things like that. People didn't really know what was going on. Some flights, they were giving out food and drinks. Some they weren't. Mm-hmm. Some crews were wearing masks. Some people were not. Mm-hmm. No, they weren't giving out masks at that point in time, and there was no stores that had them. So you'd be on flights and you'd see people with like, homemade masks that were taped around their heads. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. And then getting home to be in a place where, after the initial lockdown, when I first got home, once things started to open up again, like June, we did, like you said, had a great summer where people got to go out and do things. Most people, not everybody. And, but it was weird. I mean, I have an autoimmune disease, so traveling was scary. Mm-hmm. Luckily for me, I had my sister there who was freaking out more than I was. Mm-hmm. So myself and my brother-in-law kind of got to like focus on her instead of on our own insecurities at that point in time. Mm-hmm. It kind of helped. But yeah, we got home safe. It was good. And, here it is almost a year later. Hoping that things will get better, but hope isn't going to do it.
One thing I've been liking to ask people on these podcasts is there anything you've taken positively out of this COVID experience? Like, is there anything that's happened for you that maybe wouldn't have normally happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of things. Even just like rekindling a love of like reading and watching some old classic movies, small things like that, mm-hmm. to like the people that I've gotten stronger relationships with online, mm-hmm. Because you're talking to people more online than you are in person. Getting back into practicing music, more frequently. There are things that suck, obviously not working as much because nobody wants to spend money on promotional materials when like their business is not doing anything. Mm-hmm. What else? I mean, I don't know. Just I started baking, little things like that.
I wanted to ask you about your baking. Actually, that was a question I had for you. I've noticed that since COVID has started, you've become quite the master baker. I mean, where did this come from? Did you bake beforehand, or did you just something you decided to do to keep yourself busy?
No, I've always been a bit of a cook, but it was more like pots and pans kind of stuff. And
like you're whipping up some serious baking dishes, man, like cookies and muffins and pies and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I started getting, I kind of said to myself, kind of the same way I was with music. Like if I was going to do this, because it started off with just a couple of cookies and then moved on to something else simple. And then I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to bake something that is actually going to teach me a new skill towards baking. So the next thing you know, I'm doing things like Portuguese butter tarts, or I'm doing like, eclairs.
You're not making chocolate chip cookies. You're like doing it.
Yeah. I wanted to do things that were like, this is something more complex. Like, I tried macarons and stuff like that. Like these are those things that people go, ooh, ah, when they see them, not just like, oh, cool cookie.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to do something that was going to be, I guess, a bit extravagant or interesting, teach myself a new skill. I mean, I haven't done much baking since the summer because it was too hot to bake in the condo. So, we'll see if I start baking again now as the lockdown continues. But
right on. Well, thanks, Jerry, man. I really want to thank you for coming on today. I mean, I had a lovely chat with you, and I always found you a very interesting cat. I know we've had a few conversations, maybe late night, in our favorite corner of the favorite bar, where we meet. And I mean, it's a real pleasure to have you on here today. For anybody who's at home and maybe looking to find you and listen to some of your music or look you up for some design work, how can people find you?
I think the simple way is just a Google search of Jerry Stamp, JerryStamp. JerryStamp.com is like my portfolio site for design. There's a SoundCloud out there. I'm all over Spotify and all those other streaming apps and stuff, Apple Music, Google Play. So stuff there. It's everywhere.
Right on, man. Well, thanks again, Jerry. Really appreciate you taking the time today, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks very much, man. It was fun.
Take care. Big thanks to Jerry Stamp there for coming on. Really great look into, what Jerry has been through over the years. I mean, I love chatting about the early 2000s songwriters. That stuff was incredible. If you're from Newfoundland at all, you know the deck, CBTGs, Distortion and the Levy and Roxy's and the Bull and Barrel. We've all spent nights up there, and that place to me has held such a special place in my heart. It's where I first started playing music in St. John's, with Distortion and CBs and the Levy. Like these guys who own these places, they were incredible for young musicians. They really allowed you to get on a stage and get out there and really cut your teeth to be able to try and work out some songs and work out how you feel on a stage. And I mean, that was a great look into that. I love chatting with Jerry about moving to Toronto with King Nancy. I think anybody who's not a musician or involved in the music industry loves to hear about bands grinding it out. It's just such an interesting story. It's been told 1,000 times, and they're all different and unique. It's such a grind, such a battle. Especially coming out from Newfoundland, where you think it's probably a little bit easier than what it was. I'm not speaking for Jerry, but I did the same thing. I moved to Toronto for a number of years, and I mean, it's tough. It's a different world. It's not as easy as it is in St. John's by any means. So I love chatting with Jerry about that. It was incredible. Really, really interesting to hear him talk about pivoting once the autoimmune disorder came up, and he started battling with that, and he turned to graphic design, and he made the life decision to move to Costa Rica to battle with for the climate change. And I mean, you got to hand it to him. He's just been grinding through, and really, really intelligent guy. It's just, I really enjoy talking to Jerry. I mean, I've spent a lot of late nights chatting with Jerry, maybe at the Bull over a couple pops, and every single time I always learn something from Jerry. It's like he's super wise, and I mean, just love chatting with him. So yeah, big thanks to Jerry Stamp for coming on, and yeah, I mean, I'll be back again this Friday on a live stream, guys, on my Facebook Live. Make sure you do follow me on all my channels, at Dave Whitty on Instagram, Dave Whitty on Twitter, Dave Whitty Music on Facebook, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. It's this podcast is really rolling now. I've been really enjoying getting the new guests on. Really, really looking forward to the next 2 weeks. I mean, I got some great guests lined up. Not going to give any spoilers right now, but really looking forward to those conversations and getting their stories told. Other than that, guys, thanks very much for tuning in, and thanks for all the shares and love and support over the last few weeks. I can't believe this is the 5th episode of this podcast already. I mean, I made the decision to do it one day, and sometimes I'm a bit indecisive, and I think about doing stuff for a long time, and I just pulled the trigger on this one, and I got to say, it's one of the best decisions I've made. I've really enjoyed putting all these together and learning how to edit the videos and the music and editing the audio and all that stuff. So once again, thanks for all the love, guys. It's really, really appreciated. And And I really, really love it. Thanks very much. Other than that about does it for me. From downtown St. John's, Newfoundland, I'm Dave Whitty. Thanks very much, guys. Peace.